Welcome, welcome, welcome to the final episode of Pregnant and Strong. I can't believe it. This is just a little intro before the episode starts. As with most episodes, it comes with a trigger warning. We talk a fair amount about baby loss and miscarriage in this episode. So if that's a topic that is, very sensitive for you at the moment or something that you don't want to be listening to, then please, please, please skip this episode or skip that part of it. It comes in about halfway through, maybe a bit further on, and I will give a warning because it's a listener question about kind of exercise around miscarriage. We also talk about I touch on postnatal depression. We talk about lots of different things, but mainly about like physical exercise in pregnancy and trying to dispel some myths around that. So if you did want to listen to the first part and then skip the part about baby loss and miscarriage, then please feel free to do that. As always, it's just me today, so I don't even have a guest to thank and introduce. It's just a Q&A for me. Thank you to all the people that sent in their questions and shared their questions. I know they're going to be really, really useful for everyone else listening, and they're definitely questions that I get asked a lot in classes, by my one-to-one clients, on Instagram. So it was really great to be able to kind of dive into those and share some evidence around them with you all. I really hope you enjoy the episode, and I will, see you on the other side. Hello, 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 my Pregnant and Strong team. Welcome to episode 8. We're at the last episode. I can't believe it. I'm just going to be bouncing on I'm going to pretend that like no one's actually watching the visual of this, because I'm just going to be like bouncing on my birthing ball. And this episode's a little bit different to the other episodes I've been doing. So I'm going to be like looking down at my notes and reading a little bit. So I'm just sort of hoping you're listening to this on, wherever you listen to your podcasts, because then I don't think the visual's going to be as entertaining or exciting as when I've had my wonderful guests here. But we're at the last episode. I've been reflecting a little bit on the series, and I've had so much amazing feedback, both from friends and people I don't know, and just on Spotify, like people dropping comments. Way back when I had a conversation with my great friend and true inspiration, Fiona Moss, it was a few months ago now, and she was like, just do the podcast. And I was like, yeah, do you know what? Like, sod it, just do it. And I'm so glad that after that conversation with Fiona, I was like, right, I'm just going to make this happen. And all the conversations I've had, all the topics that we've covered, and the amazing people I've had on, and the variety of it, and just reflecting on that before going into recording this pod has made me super grateful to have the opportunity to be able to share these conversations with people and just have this documented. That's what I really wanted. Is I was having these powerful conversations with amazing men and women doing amazing things in the space. And I was like, I need to be able to share this with people. So I'm really glad I've been able to do that. And this is the last in the series. I'm not going to say we're definitely going to be coming back postpartum, but I think I've got lots of ideas, and people keep getting in touch with me like, this person would be amazing to interview. This person would be amazing to interview. So let's see. I'm currently nearly 39 weeks pregnant. So I'm just really pleased that I've managed to get this one recorded before baby arrives. So this week's episode, enough of my chat. This week's episode is just me, no guests. And I'm going to be doing a sort of Q&A episode. So first episode, way back at the beginning of the series, I did talk a little bit about some myths. So there might be like a tiny bit of overlap, because, these big myths in the pregnancy fitness space are obviously what people are asking questions about. So there might be a little bit of overlap, but generally I've tried to choose questions from people that are a little bit different to what we've already covered. And I've spent a lot of time researching this episode, because one of the things a very good friend of mine said, and it's actually really resonated with me, and I saw a post on Instagram which kind of talks to this point last night, is a friend of mine said, when I was sort of asking her about the question that she brought to me, I just thought what's the point in risking it? So there was a lot of things I didn't do. And this post on Instagram last night said, why aren't we, instead of saying like, let's say no because of the risk, why are we not questioning that and questioning the evidence behind it and saying, why are we even thinking there's a risk when what other area of health are we saying exercise is damaging? No other area. So for the majority of cases, in the majority of scenarios, exercise in pregnancy is only beneficial. So yes, adapt, yes, modify, and we're going to talk about that. But ultimately, it is going to improve your health outcomes. And hopefully that's what this podcast has taught you, especially those episodes with Hayley and Abby, who are experts in that field. And yeah, it's about reframing it, and it's about supporting women not even being in that situation where they are thinking there's a risk and they are being fearmongered into thinking I shouldn't be doing this because it's putting myself and my baby in danger. So we're basically going to run through some questions that people have asked me. And what I've tried to do, this is going back to what I was just saying about my friend. She was like, I just really wanted some evidence behind it. And I think that's what lots of people want. Unfortunately, in the women's health space, not just pregnancy space, but the whole sort of women's health science sort of space, evidence is not as plentiful as we would like, people working in the space. But there are a fair few amount of studies that have been done in the sort of last 5 years. And there's more and more being done all the time with amazing people that I'm going to drop in the show notes. Margie Davenport, Christina Prevett, lots of people working through the Active Pregnancy Foundation. So there is a lot of kind of stuff going on behind the scenes. But when you dive deeper, you might see that some of the studies involve quite limited numbers. But we're building a picture, which is the most important thing. So what I've tried to do for each question is, and these will all be shared in the show notes, I've tried to reference a study and any evidence or guidelines that I've referred to. I'll drop the links in there just in case you're one of those people who just wants to do a bit of background reading about where the evidence is at the moment to make an informed decision. So basically, there's a lot of the questions that came into me were exercise related. Obviously, this podcast is Pregnant and Strong, and I'm a personal trainer, so that's kind of to be expected. But we've got one on diet, and we've got one on like miscarriage and returning to exercise. And obviously, I'll start this episode with a trigger warning, but yeah, that's going to be an important one. Some of the questions are real like myth busting opportunities, so I'm excited about sharing that with you. So first question we had, is it safe to lie on my back whilst exercising when pregnant? I've been told I shouldn't do this, especially not in my second and third trimester. So this was not just one question, can I tell you? This was one question that got sent in to me, but this is also a question that came up time and time again in my most recent block of classes. I always start any kind of movement on the back in a class, in a in-person class, by saying, does everyone feel comfortable on their back? And then from that, often the conversation goes, am I allowed to lie on my back? I've been told I shouldn't be lying on my back. I'm a bit worried about lying on my back because such and such a person said I shouldn't, or I've read here that I shouldn't. So we call it in the exercise world, we call these positions supine positions, so on our back. And I'm going to drop a couple of studies in there. There's a couple. There's one from 2019 that talks about, that looks at kind of, is there any adverse effects? But I just kind of, without going into the kind of studies and evidence behind it, I just want to go through a few things. Unless you have a medical condition called ACC, which is aorta cable compression, which you would know about most probably, and I'm going to talk about how we can test for this in a second. Unless you have that and you know about that, and that is a condition where the uterus compresses the aorta and the vena cava, which are the two main arteries to the blood sources to the heart. So unless you have that condition, which is going to limit blood flow essentially between you and the baby, um, you are safe to lie on your back. Okay. So to be able to test for this, we can do a little lying on our back test. Normally, if you have this condition, it will become very apparent in the first few minutes of you lying on your back, but particularly by 10 minutes. So we're talking probably between sort of a minute and 3 minutes, you'll know, but if not by 10 minutes. So a test is just lying on your back for up to 10 minutes. If you start feeling dizzy, faint, unwell, raised heart rate, kind of low blood pressure, that's what we're looking for, there's a chance that you could have ACC. So then you would contact your medical professional, you would go and speak to someone about it. And, with a lot of things in training and pregnancy, and this is what I think is very often not communicated, if your body is not tolerating something, i.e. you've got ACC and your body's not tolerating lying in a supine position or lying on your back, your body is going to send you a message. With ACC, that message is feeling faint, feeling dizzy, racing heart, and low blood pressure. Basically, for most women, lying on your back is going to be absolutely fine. And most of you will know this. So that's a really good place to start. So, and hopefully that already dispels for lots of you listening. You're like, I know I don't have that. I know I can lie on my back for 5-10 minutes. I don't feel dizzy. I don't feel, I can't feel my heart rate increasing, all those things. I'm good to go. Okay. And if you're working with a PT or you're in a gym and you haven't tested it yet and you're a bit worried about that, you could test it at home, when someone's there, or you could talk to your PT about that, or you could talk to someone in your gym class about that. But generally, most of the population don't suffer from that. So there's so many people not doing supine exercises, which includes a lot of core and pelvic floor work. So they're eliminating all those movements just because they've heard from someone it's really dangerous to lie on your back. So you're going to have a sign from your body that that's not okay, which is going to be dizziness, basically dizziness and fainting. In really severe cases, someone could faint in, 30 seconds plus of lying on their back. So you really would know if you had that. But the good news is if you have ACC, when you lie down, you feel those symptoms. As soon as you sit up or stand up, those symptoms will go. So it's not like a permanent thing, obviously. So it's good to do the test so we know. So, and the other thing that's coming out of studies, the couple of studies that I've looked at that I'll drop in the show notes, is there's obviously a difference between sleeping on your back and exercising on your back for a finite period of time. So say you're in the gym and you're doing a bench press, or say you're in the gym and you're doing some dead bugs on your back. That interval, that set of dead bugs or bench press or whatever you're doing on your back might last for like 45 seconds to a minute max. And then you'd sit up and change movement. Even if you were doing a core set, you might be on your back for a couple of minutes. If you're sleeping on your back, you are likely to be on your back for an extended period of time. There is some evidence and some studies to suggest a link between sleeping on your back and an increased rate of stillbirth. Now, I'm not going to go into that today, but I just wanted to flag and highlight that there is a difference between exercising on your back for a small amount of time and resting on your back in sleep for a whole night, for example, continuously every night, if that's the position you sleep. Hence why the advice for sleeping on your back is there, to change that when you become pregnant. So I really hope that's helped clear that up. And do you know what? It's all about how you feel. Like, I was at a sound bath last night and I'm 38 plus 5, I think. I've lost track. 38 or 39 weeks pregnant. I was lying on my back in the sound bath. So I wasn't doing any exercises. I was just lying on my back, and I lay on my back for 5 minutes and I was like, it doesn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel faint. I didn't feel dizzy. I just didn't feel comfortable. So I just moved to my side. If you get to your third trimester, for example, and lying on your back and doing a dumbbell press or a core movement doesn't feel good and you feel uncomfortable, modify the movement, because there's no point doing something that doesn't feel comfortable. It's your body giving you feedback. It's your body sending a message. It's not dangerous. Nothing terrible is going to happen, but it's your body giving feedback that actually at the moment that position doesn't feel good. And there's plenty of things we can do to suggest different movements. So, for example, instead of doing sort of core work on your back, things like dead bugs or leg raises or heel taps, those kind of things, just come onto your front or your side. You can do bird dog rows or bird dog holds. You could do side plank variations. You could do core movements from standing, like Pallof press or farmer's carry. You might be like, Iona, what the hell are you talking about? But if you just jot these movements down, if you are feeling like that, you can get some ideas of what you can modify to do instead, rather than just being like, right, I can't do any core work because I can't lie on my back. So hopefully that's dispelled the, is it safe to lie on your back? It's something that I've honestly heard so often in my classes, and people getting in touch with me and clients. So it's a really common one. That's why it was a great one to start with. Next one is also super common and is something that I bang on about all the time. So this question, and it kind of comes from a friend of mine who has started training at a new gym and was at a class, and the coach said something to her. So this question is it safe to continue core training in pregnancy? She wasn't really asking that, but that's a question I get asked a lot. So I've kind of tied the two together. I've been told not to do crunching exercises or any exercises that cause coning or doming. So I've kind of put three questions into one here, but it's all about core. So again, I'm going to drop some studies in. Like I said, the narrative around core exercises has always been, and I'll just go through this before I answer the question, it's never really been about it being dangerous for the baby or the mother, other than the people that are overlapping with lying on your back. It's more been, we shouldn't be doing exercises like crunching, or exercises that cause doming or coning, which is basically where you can see the muscles kind of pushing up through the linea alba, which is the sheath of muscle that goes across the front of the abs. So if you can, I'm just going to just stand up if you are watching this. If you're not, this doesn't really work. But my bump is here. If I do an exercise on my back where there's coning, the ab muscles kind of push through. And you can see like this weird, when I was in my first pregnancy, my sister-in-law said to me, like, it looks like an alien. You will know what I mean if you've ever seen coning or doming on yourself, is you can kind of see this like protrusion of the muscles through the center of the abdominals. So it's very noticeable. So this whole narrative around crunching is and core training really has always been really around it having a detrimental effect on the separation of the abs, which is a condition called diastasis recti abdominis. Now, 100% of women will have diastasis recti. Sorry, I find it so hard to say, even though I say it like literally every week. So ab separation. Every single woman, by the time they're 36 weeks, will have that. That is going to happen because we have evolved. My stomach, my abdomen, my ab muscles do not look the same as they did 6 months ago, 8 months ago, because they've had to stretch, the linea alba's had to stretch, they've had to make room, they've had to adapt. So that is going to happen to everyone. The fear around core exercises was, and particularly doming and coning, was that doing an exercise that encourages that or that results in that is going to make your ab separation worse. So the newer research coming out has proven, or suggests, I should say, That is not the case. So that doing exercises, core training and doing things like crunches is not responsible for increasing either your chances or the severity of your ab separation. So that's the first thing. And that is the biggest fear mongering, is you're going to make it worse. And lots of people are very worried about this ab separation. They're very worried about how it looks. They're very worried about like the aesthetic of it afterwards. I've got lots of women saying, like, I've got 4 centimeters and I don't know what to do to reduce it. And you can see it and it's doming. And, we are all going to have that separation if we have a baby. It is not an indication of our core strength. It's about how our bump has grown. Some people carry really big. Some people carry small. Some people carry very out in front. So their linea albus had to stretch a lot to accommodate for that bump. Some people have got a very small bump, so they're likely to have less separation. It's not the more separation you have, the weaker your core. So that's a really important first thing to remember. The second thing is that core training and specific exercises like crunching are not going to make that separation worse. And there's some studies, in the last few years to show that actually the benefit of training your core, it's not going to, by the same breath, it's also not going to mean if you do loads of core training in pregnancy, you're not going to have a separation. This is all about how you carry your bump, how big your bump is essentially, and your like genetic makeup of muscles, body composition. So we need to kind of remove this relationship between core training and the separation with our abs. However, in terms of recovery, we want to think about function over aesthetics. And it's important to acknowledge that aesthetics is really, it's really important to a lot of women. And we've got, it can really change our life if we've got this big separation in our abs and our stomach doesn't look the same and we don't want to wear a bikini and we don't feel confident and it looks different. So I'm not reducing the importance of the aesthetic concerns of women. But what I'm saying is if we're thinking about function, we want to focus on rebuilding the strength of that abdominal wall postpartum. We want to think about bringing back in crunching movements really progressively. We want to think about focusing on stabilizing, rebuilding the deep core muscles, and that can start very quickly after postpartum, just with breathing, connecting with that breath and really practicing breathing well out of the chest into the diaphragm. So there's lots of things we can do to really help that. It's really important. And so many women talk to me about this ab separation and are either worried about it, how it looks, or worried that they are making it worse by training their core or, strengthening their core, which really, really is important. If you have one takeaway, that is not the case. We want to, in postpartum, be focusing on rebuilding, re-strengthening from the ground up, slowly, progressively, building in these movements like rotations, stabilizing movements, strengthening all areas of our core. It can be, concerning when we see coning or doming because it looks kind of strange and it looks like it could be worrying. But I hope that this answer has gone some way to kind of reassure you that it is literally the physicality of that linea albus stretching. And sometimes you will reduce that gap after you've had a baby. Just naturally, those muscles will kind of tighten again. And, as time goes on and you're kind of getting back into movement and physical activity, it will reduce. But it's more a natural adaptation rather than I'm going to train my core every day to reduce my gap from 5 centimeters to 2 centimeters. And there's other things we can do. So really thinking about the breath, and that can have a really positive impact on managing that pressure in the abdomen. And, we really, whilst it doesn't reduce your chances, this is why doing work on our pelvic floor and core during pregnancy in an appropriate way to our own starting points is super important. The pelvic floor and the abdominal wall is very, very much affected by pregnancy for everyone. Doesn't matter whether you're an athlete, whether you've got a six pack, whether you've never trained before, doesn't matter. Everyone, every person who has been pregnant is going to have, there's going to be an effect on their abdominal wall and their pelvic floor. What we want to do is to prevent as much atrophy, so reduce a reduction of muscle strength as possible. So we want to keep that core working as best we can in our own capabilities, within our own capacity. We want to keep that pelvic floor working really well. We want to keep that whole core canister. We want to focus on improving that breath, all those things, and that's going to really help. So when sorry, I'm going to be really careful what I say. No, I'm not. When a male coach comes up to you in the gym and says, you can't do V-ups or you can't do crunches, and you're in your second trimester, and you're like me and you go to CrossFit 3 times a week, you go, why? What's the evidence? And why are you telling me that? Because there is no evidence to suggest that you shouldn't be doing that at that point. So what I would say, and this is what I'm going to end on, as you can tell, I could just go off on a rant on this. What you want to think about is your capacity, starting hardcore abdominal work and like hanging from a bar and doing V-ups and crunches when you've never done them before in your second trimester is not a good idea. We should be focusing on specific core training to strengthen those muscles for pregnancy. And that's what I would say. All my CrossFit lovers and functional fitness lovers that love going to those gym classes and core is incorporated, and I'm one of these people, you crack on and carry on doing that core. However, we should really be thinking as we move through our pregnancy, what specific exercises could we be doing to support our changing body and support what we're trying to achieve in pregnancy, which is strengthening maintenance, basically, and strengthening these muscles that we need to carry our bump and birth our baby and then postpartum recovery. So really thinking about things like farmer's carries, kettlebell halers. I'm just reeling off some exercises. You guys can look these up, but if you go to the gym and you want some variations, bird dog rows on a bench to make them a bit more challenging, because let's be honest, people would just have us doing bird dogs all the time. Dead bugs, supported dead bugs, banded dead bugs, banded Pallof presses. There is good mornings, glute bridges. There is a whole host of core exercises that we can do to help us on our mission, which is keep that core ticking along whilst we're pregnant and avoid losing that strength. There's also lots of those exercises I mentioned can be done by people who might be listening to this thinking, oh my God, I've never, ever done any core work and I don't feel confident to start now. So, could I do that when I haven't trained before? Absolutely. There's progressive ways that we could bring that in. And please do give me a shout if you're someone that's listening to this and you're like, I really want to get stronger in pregnancy, but I don't know where to start, because I will definitely, whilst I'm sitting on the sofa breastfeeding in my little bubble, I'll definitely send you a message back and help with that, and there's lots of great resources out there to help with that. So please reach out to someone and say, instead of saying I've never done it, so I'm not going to do it, take responsibility for that and be like, I really want to give this a go and I really want to actually use this time to get stronger in my core and pelvic floor. So yeah, I've got a couple of studies that I can put in there because I know that's something that people are very nervous about. Right, now the next one is something that I'm going to say now. I have no personal experience of this. I also, I've worked with a client who has been through a fertility treatment, just one, but I haven't had any experience of working with clients that have suffered from baby loss. But I have, as part of my amazing Hatch coach qualification, they did an incredible unit as part of that training, which I think is just so powerful and amazing, on supporting women returning to exercise post baby loss. And one of the questions I got sent into me was this one. I've had a miscarriage and want to get back into exercise, but I'm not sure if it's safe and when or how to get back into it. So yeah, and I've actually just remembered that I was completely making that up. I have had a client that suffered from baby loss, very early stages, and we did work together. I don't know, it must be my baby brain, but we did work together on kind of returning to exercise. And it's important at this point to note that baby loss and miscarriage is such a wide spectrum. It can be anything from, very, very early miscarriage to stillbirth and losing a child, an early postpartum also would count as, you've carried a baby and then you lose a baby very soon after it's born. Your physical body and mental body is still a postpartum body. And part of the learning that I did at Hatch was lots of women are not then treated as postnatal because they've lost their baby. And so this answer is very nuanced, and I'm going to focus I'm going to really hone in because it's such a huge topic. And as I said, like, I'm not an expert, but I'm going to give you some tips and some kind of support from the knowledge that I've been given. So if you are going through fertility treatment, let's start there, because I think this is a really big one. There are lots and lots of people I know who have been through IVF. There's lots and lots of people going through this fertility treatment at the moment. I'm sure there's people listening that are going through it. And there is no evidence that exercise is detrimental to fertility treatment. And actually, it's likely to increase your success. So lots of people, and I've just heard this anecdotally, some people might be told to lose weight or to, think about weight management, to have IVF. Exercise can obviously help with that. We want to be in like the strongest physical shape, if that makes sense, like feeling strong and being healthy. So exercise is going to improve our health outcomes. So therefore, it's likely to increase success. Again, there's no study on this. There's no evidence on this. The same way there's no evidence that it's detrimental. Medical advice differs and is not based on evidence or scientific studies. There are two times in a cycle of fertility treatment where people might be told not, or will be told, and definitely the clients that I've worked with going through fertility treatment were told this, that the 2-week wait, so when you're waiting after the embryo has been inserted to take your pregnancy test to see if you're pregnant, you've got to lower that intensity, no impact, and lower load. So if it was someone like me, who's a like real CrossFit junkie and like runner, I'd have to really pare that back in that 2-week window. I'd have to do like, super lightweight stretching, that kind of thing. It's also the time where most women are, really nervous, quite rightly. They've gone through this whole process, which is very demanding physically and emotionally. And then they're waiting to find out if they haven't had a positive pregnancy test. The last thing they're going to want to do is jeopardize that in any way. That doesn't mean that exercise could cause anything. There's literally no evidence. However, if someone is nervous, you just want them to look after their mental health. What is the point of going for a run? Even if you're a really keen runner like I am, what is the point of going for a run if you get really sad news and you haven't got a positive pregnancy test, and then the woman then takes that burden of, I went for a run, it could be that, even though it's not that. It's not linked to that. There's no evidence. It's literally not. But it's about supporting the mental health of that person going through fertility treatment. So the 2 weeks after the embryo is inserted, very light intensity or nothing at all, and that is really to ensure that the person going through the fertility treatment is supported, like, with their mental health. And then the next part where you are told not to by a medical professional is around the retrieval. So this is when the egg is removed. The eggs are removed, so the earlier on in the process. And at this point, there is a risk of egg intorsion. I'm reading my notes here. but the risk is the same for all women. So as in, if you're pregnant in the early stages, you have a risk of egg intorsion. So it's not the risk isn't higher, but again, because you're going through fertility treatment, you want to have in your head, I don't want to be blaming myself for anything. And you want to give yourself the best chances. But I want to be really clear here that there is no evidence to say, even at this point, that it's unsafe to exercise. But also you'll be feeling pretty ropey. So you probably wouldn't be wanting to go for like a really intense gym class or going on a long run. What your body would probably really want is like a lovely, nourishing stretch, mobility, that kind of thing. And then once you've gone through the first stage of IVF, it's really important. And I thought when I was learning about this, I thought, and my experience of working with people is it's really important to think about why these people are having IVF. So one of my clients, I was in a same-sex couple. So they had IVF so they were able to have a child. And there's no health complications as part of that. That's simply the process they had to go through to have a child. So once they were pregnant, their pregnancy was just like a normal pregnancy, as in a natural pregnancy. So you can just carry on as normal. Whereas if you have other health complications, that's when you really need to work alongside your medical team and be like, right, okay, what's the next step now? And I should just say here, before we move on to thinking about miscarriage, is that a PT or someone working at a gym cannot trump what medical professionals say. So even though we know there is no evidence to suggest that exercise is detrimental in any part of this process, if your medical professional has said to you, or someone who's taken care of you, and your medical team has said to you, do not exercise in this 2-week window, I'm not going to override that. No PT should be overriding that. No PT should be saying, well, there's no evidence, so you might as well, just do it. We're going to go with what the medical team say, and then we're going to support you getting back to it afterwards. And as we've said, you're probably only going to be advised to stop or lower intensity for those 2 periods. So actually then you can start again. So hopefully that's really helpful for fertility, because I know the messaging is quite blurred. And if you're going through something like fertility treatment, and then no wonder people are nervous. And because the messaging is around like there could be a risk, still there could be a risk with exercising. That's why people are nervous. So hopefully I've gone some way to say what the evidence says. There's no link. And then it's really about thinking about what your medical professionals and having a real discussion with them around it, and not just always taking what they say on face value and just being like, I just want to know what your reasons for telling me to do that are. Especially for someone that really loves exercise, you train a lot, you use it to support your mental health. It's a big process to go through fertility treatment, and it's about looking after yourself as best you can. So miscarriage, obviously I'm not going to talk to each kind of stage of when this could happen. And I think it's really important I'm going to put the name of a resource in the bottom of an amazing woman that spoke on my Hatch course. And I'm going to put the name of the organization that she works for, because they would be able to provide really specific support and knowledge on this. But I just wanted to cover a few things. Firstly, there's no evidence to suggest that exercise contributes to baby loss. I've had quite a few clients and spoken to quite a few people who have really, gone on a real journey when they have suffered from a miscarriage, where they have blamed themselves. And I think that's where this can come from, is if you've got someone that trains pretty hard and then they had a miscarriage, you're searching for an answer of why this has happened. And some people might be like, maybe it's because I did this. So no, it isn't. It's mainly, the main reasons for miscarriage are chromosome defects, which we know about, and genetics. So those are the main reasons. Now, returning to training post miscarriage is very personal. If it's very early on, you just really want to think about waiting until those symptoms have disappeared, exactly like you would, after you'd had a baby. You would wait until that bleeding has subsided, you'd wait until those symptoms have subsided. So that's what you'd do. And wait until you're feeling like, you want to kind of move again and you're feeling physically and kind of mentally strong. What lots of people say is this kind of fertility journey and suffering from a miscarriage or baby loss is the impact on your emotional well-being and your mental health is so huge. Exercise is so powerful in changing that. And there's both scientific research, obviously, loads of it, in pregnancy or not, that exercise can improve mental health outcomes, significantly. So when you are ready, adding that movement back into your life is really, really, really important for that mental health. And that's where we're seeing some of the most positive outcomes. The other thing is, thinking a bit more about this would be a really great place to start if you are on this journey, is lots of women who have suffered from baby loss or miscarriage can feel quite disconnected to themselves and their body, and they're going through this really serious ordeal. And actually moving with intent can help rebuild that connection between the mind and body. And you see this in people kind of recovering from chronic illness and like trauma and injuries. It's a similar sort of pattern. And it really helps work through trauma because you're really connecting with the physical body. And I'm not going to actually say anything more on that because, like I said, I have not personally experienced this, and I'm really, really mindful of being sensitive. I think it's not talked about enough. It's not openly spoken about enough. And I'm so grateful for the person that wrote in that question, because I think we're constantly talking about, when this happens in my birth, how am I going to recover? We're not necessarily thinking about the huge group of people who are going on this other journey who equally need support and probably need more bespoke, personalized support. So I'm going to drop the details of a charity organization called Postpartum After Baby Loss in the show notes. And they are an amazing organization and really worth reaching out to if you're going through this, or if you're listening to this, because I put the trigger warning at the start. If you're listening to this and you've got a friend going through something, maybe you could really share this with them. I know it's really difficult to talk about and to be there for someone and support someone, but it's also just when I was sort of reflecting on this, I was like, exercise has the power. And this is something Jenny from Postpartum After Baby Loss said in the training we were doing. Exercise has the power to shift your state and change how you feel. And if we can support women getting back into that after going through something like this, it can really, really help them rebuild their connection with themselves and their body and, kind of move forward. Okay, so I've still got like 3 questions and not a lot of time. I'm going to do like whistle stop through the next few. So the next one is, I haven't done much structured exercise before, but I'm conscious that I want to get stronger during my pregnancy for birth and postpartum, and wondered if this was safe and how to start. Okay. Now, I was going to be like, don't even get me started on this, but you are. I've talked about this before, and we talked about it quite a lot in the podcast I recorded with Abby. So if you haven't listened to that, go back to that. But research shows, and I'm going to quote this because this was from some re-released guidance of physical activity in pregnancy by Margie Davenport, who is like a leading person in research, and she in pregnancy physical activity. I didn't really give her enough credit then. I can't remember her actual role, but she is literally involved in much of the research in this space. People who were not active before their pregnancy, but started being active in pregnancy, had some of the greatest reductions in pregnancy complications, such as lower rates of gestational diabetes, hypertensive disorders, so that means high blood pressure, preeclampsia, an excessive weight gain. And I kind of feel like that's all I really need to share is if you are someone that has not been physically active, obviously it's not a good idea to go to a Barry's boot camp and get on that treadmill and start sprinting or, go straight out and be like, I'm going to run 10K when you've never run before. But never ever think if you haven't exercised and structurally exercised, I'm talking about. So, like, if you've never lifted weights or you've never done body weight movements like squats or lunges, never ever think that because you're pregnant, you can't start. Yes, we need to be progressive. Yes, we need to use common sense. Yes, we need to really think about load and capacity and how we build that. But absolutely, we can start doing some things. Lightweight, resistance bands, body weight strength stuff. Yes, 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 yes. Because you want to be as strong physically and mentally as you can to go through this pregnancy and birth and beyond. And I just think this is so important. This message needs to change. This signposting needs to change. The narrative needs to change that if you don't exercise already, you can't start and just do some pregnancy yoga. No, like get those resistance bands out, get those light weights, go to a gym class and tell them you're pregnant and you're a beginner and get moving in some way. If you're privileged enough to be able to get someone to support you, get someone that knows what they're talking about, get someone that's done their pre and postnatal training, or even more than that, someone who is really interested in the area and has dived a bit deeper in and can really help you. It's about using common sense. We're not going to go and start doing Olympic lifting if we've never lifted a barbell before, but we can go and start doing some squats with a bit of resistance to build that glute strength to support us. We can go and start doing some progressive core exercises to strengthen that core canister ready for what's to come. So I hope by the passion in my voice, I've managed to get that across. There are some guidelines that are created by the Canadian, I can't remember exactly the name, but I've got the link here and I'm going to put that in the show notes. So guidelines about, what you can do and kind of introducing that. Okay. Right. Another one. I've heard that I'm going to whistle stop tour now, guys. I've heard that this is another one I hear all the time. I've heard that high intensity exercise isn't advised during pregnancy. I love HIIT training and do lots of high intensity exercises like intervals and high rock style classes. And I'm worried that this might be harmful to the baby or me if I continue. Okay, so the guidance used to be that we shouldn't, our heart rate shouldn't exceed 140 beats per minute. It was in the guidance historically. It was removed in 1994. And then, unfortunately, it was put back in 2020. However, it is now not seen as a measure that we should go on. It's not seen as this was in some guidance in the States, by the way. It's not in guidance in the UK, and it's not in the updated guidance from the Canadian body of who is kind of the most forward-thinking guidance that is being used by fitness professionals and the majority of people. It's not an effective way to monitor. Like, heart rate is very variable. Some people have a very low resting heart rate and always have. Some people have a very high resting heart rate. Me doing exercise and getting to 140 and the next person is going to look very different. So basically, if you are used to doing high intensity training, i.e. high rocks, sprint training, HIIT training, whatever you want to call it, whatever it is, you are safe to carry on doing that. Look out for the signs that your body is not tolerating it, of course, like we've talked about all the way through. Are you getting dizzy? Are you feeling crap, basically? Faint, racing heart? I mean, more than, because you've worked out. Basically, dizzy and faint. If you are, probably a good idea to dial it down, okay? Because A, you don't want to be feeling like that. And B, it's probably a sign that, at the moment, my body's working really hard. It's not tolerating this level of intensity in a workout. If you're not feeling that and you're feeling good, especially that second trimester where you get that kind of renewed sense of energy, like, go for it, If, as I just said, if you've never done high intensity work before and you're in a gym class and they're like, right, we're going to sprint, hard out sprint, I would suggest being like, I'm pregnant, I don't feel as comfortable doing that. I'm just going to go like 6 out of 10 and I'm just going to move. But if you are used to it and you do it a lot, I want you to keep going, guys, go for it. There are some studies, they're very small, but there are a couple of studies that have been released. One is about high intensity resistance training, so high intensity training with form of resistance, so weights. And another one is around sprint training. And in those studies, despite being small, there is no detrimental effect to maternal health, the kind of like umbilical cord kind of stuff going on between mother and the baby, or fetal heart rate, which is what they were looking at. So basically not harmful for the baby or for the mum, as long as the mum is showing that they can tolerate that. RPE, which is rate of perceived effort, is a really good way of approaching training in pregnancy that you can read in some places about the talk test. So you should be able to, you should be able to do something and exercise and talk at the same time. But I was definitely doing, and this is coming from someone who trains quite intensely. So if you're listening, this isn't you, just ignore me. If you're listening and this is you, feel confident. I was definitely someone that was training in my second trimester and even into my third, where I was doing a session, and if someone had tried to talk to me, I couldn't have held a conversation with them. You know, I was working intensely and my body was tolerating it and it felt good. So I carried on. So RPE is a really good way of thinking about rate of perceived effort, is how much effort you are putting in and how you feel. So if you'd normally approach something with like an 8 out of 10, it might be that day you're like, oh God, I'm just really not feeling it. Or, I'm in my third trimester, I don't feel like pushing it like that. I'm actually going to just reduce it down to like a 7 or a 6. Most workouts and most sessions can be adapted in terms of intensity, because that's just how fast you're moving, right? So you can still go to like your classes that you love. Like I did yesterday, I went to a CrossFit class where there was like numbers specified, and instead of going for the women's numbers that I'd normally go for, I just went for the scaled option and was like, I'm just going to move really steadily. And that's what my coach advised me to do. He wasn't like, don't do that. He was like, yeah, do it, but just keep moving rather than sprint, So hopefully that's really helpful. I'm going to drop the link of a really cool study, which is very small, but which was done to see like basically fetal response to HIIT training. And this was around like high intensity intervals. So yeah, this was really good. So I'll drop that into the notes. So next question, guys, we have, and this is kind of not exercise based. This is kind of more nutrition based. So I had to call in an expert. I'm sure you can, maybe if you've listened to the other episodes, you can maybe guess. But I'll share the question first. I've been getting lots of sugar cravings, which started during pregnancy, have continued postpartum. I know that this is my body telling me what it needs, but I'm worried that it's not decreasing, and if there is anything I can do to reduce these. This literally could be written by me. I had, just before we go to the answer, I had, my sugar cravings weren't like really, really bad in pregnancy first time round. This time round, they have been pretty. And when I say bad, I just mean I've been like, I'm loving the sugar this pregnancy. And last pregnancy, I did as well. But postpartum, it kind of ramped up quite a bit. And just to give you a bit of my backstory before I share Hayley's response, it's my personal experience. I was training, I breastfed for 8 months. And I was training like pretty intensely again, quite quickly. I did like progressively start and kind of lead back into it. But in comparison to lots of people, the year postpartum, like the first year postpartum for me was quite an intense kind of training year with quite a lot of endurance events. So I did my first race in the April after having my son in September, so not quite 6 months postpartum. And then I, in quick succession, had 2 half marathons, an ultra marathon, 2 high rocks races, and then another marathon, which obviously to lots of people is like, you absolute lunatic. Like, that's ridiculous. Anyway, just to give you some context, I've spoken about this before on the pod, but my period didn't come back after finishing breastfeeding. And I think all this is related to my sugar craving. The reason I'm telling you this is because I definitely think my sugar cravings were a way of my body telling me that I needed more fuel. So because I wasn't, and this was unintentional, I wasn't kind of eating enough for what I was asking my body to do, but I wasn't really aware of it because I definitely felt like I was. My body was kind of searching for that like quick energy. That coupled with, some quite bad sleep deprivation from like about 4 months postpartum to about 8.5 months postpartum, all combined. And you'll learn a little bit in this amazing response from Hayley in a second about why sleep is related. So I'm just going to get up so that's my experience. And to be honest, what Hayley says, I'm just going to get her response up now so that I can read from my notes. What Hayley says, is a really important thing to remember, is it's about giving yourself some grace. So be in the knowledge that this is normal and your body is just trying to cope with A, having a newborn, B, disrupted sleep is, hugely impactful on our hormones and on our kind of recovery and those kind of things, and feeling balanced. So all those things have an impact. So what Hayley has said is that there's a few bullet points, and I'm actually just going to read this out so that I don't kind of miss anything. So cortisol we're talking first of all about hormones, and this is kind of, as Hayley said when we were voice noting each other, she was saying, this doesn't really help solve the problem. But it helps give context and a bit of explanation. And I think sometimes when we're sort of in the midst of pregnancy and postpartum and we're thinking, oh God, like what is going on? Just having an explanation of why it's happening in our bodies can really help. It doesn't actually matter that, there's not necessarily anything we can like hard and fast do, although I'm going to give some tips on kind of what we can do. But, we're not going to change this hormone, what's happening with these hormones necessarily at this point, because a lot of these things are out of our control. So progesterone and estrogen plummet compared to where they've been before birth. And this can have an impact on appetite. This hormonal impact causes cells to be responsive to insulin, which can signal to the brain to crave quick releasing energy. So that's basically where your sugar cravings are coming from. The drop in estrogen can impact serotonin, our happy hormone, which can mean we end up reaching for comfort foods. And that kind of links with, what we talked about around like baby blues and obviously more severely postpartum depression and those kind of things. So it's kind of all linked with hormones. Cortisol is impacted by disrupted sleep. Now, this is really important to note because we're not going to be able to change that disrupted sleep in the first few months postpartum. And I always say this, and when I'm about to go into it again, I'm thinking, instead of thinking, oh God, I'm not sleeping, I'm not getting my however many hours. It's like, what can we do to make us feel good in the face of sleep deprivation or disrupted sleep? So we're not going to change the fact that cortisol is impacted by this disrupted sleep. But we can do some things, which we'll talk about later, to make us feel better. When sleep is disrupted or we're stressed, which is inevitable during the newborn phase, our hunger hormones, leptin and ghrelin, I think that's how you pronounce it. They're your hunger and satiety hormones, which is like the hormones that help you feel full. They don't reset because you're not sleeping properly, which to me makes a lot of sense. So if you don't have a full night's sleep, those hormones aren't resetting. And we know that from like our days of partying in our 20s or even partying in our 40s, if we're still doing it. It's not just about pregnancy and postpartum. It's just about tiredness in general. We feel less balanced. We like reach for other foods. We reach for quick release energy, that kind of thing. It's important to note that breastfeeding requires an additional 300 to 500 calories a day. So whether you feel like eating more or not, if you're breastfeeding, and especially if you're someone like me who's breastfeeding and training a lot, I've really, really learned from my journey last time that this time, even if I don't feel hungry, even if I feel like I'm eating enough, I'm probably not. So get some of those extra like calorie rich snacks in to kind of compensate for that. And Haley's made a good point. Like she said here, like many women are not eating full meals at this stage. So they're not, they're really just focusing on their baby. And and I was lucky because I had a partner that was at home and didn't have to go back to work straight away. Like we both worked for ourselves. So we were around a bit more. And we got into a real groove of like, he would do bath time and bedtime and I would cook dinner or vice versa. Just supporting each other so that you have those regular meals. Do things like batch cooking on a weekend if you have time. It's worth spending a little bit of time if you have that, cooking like a big minestrone or a big dal or something like that, just so that you've got like your lunch there to eat and you're not having to cook every single meal, because in those early days, it's like, I don't have time to do that. So cook once, eat 3 times, hopefully. So there's lots of things we can do to kind of balance out these sugar cravings. And the things that Haley's talked about is aiming to eat 3 meals, balanced meals throughout the day, rather than kind of like reaching for snacks, or not things like skipping breakfast and then being like so hungry that you reach for something quick and sugary. And this is kind of like pregnancy related and non-pregnancy related. Hydration is super important, especially when we are suffering from sleep deprivation. And breastfeeding, you're just so thirsty all the time and you need that hydration. So, 4 liters a day, I would say. It says here kind of avoiding sweetened drinks like Coke or, those kind of drinks, because they just add to the cravings. They're going to make it spike. And Haley shared some ideas of like snacks you can have that are going to give you that like kind of idea of having something like sweet and sugary, but are not going to kind of give you that craving and be like, right, I need more. So this is one of my favorites: dates with a little bit of nut butter, and you can even be even more bougie and like dip them in dark chocolate. Dark chocolate with some nuts. I just had loads of different types of nuts in the house to have as snacks all the time. It doesn't mean like sometimes you can't. I mean, I was eating like 1 chocolate brownie a day, if not more, in the early days postpartum. You just want to make sure you're nourishing your body around that and giving your body the best chance to heal and really look after it and those kind of things. It's more about what we do in our whole diet rather than, like in those early postpartum days where we're going for nice walks and we're picking up like a pastry or a chocolate brownie. It's really nothing to worry about, but it's like, how are we going to help our body feel more balanced and regulated in the face of change and lack of sleep? We really want to try and balance those hormones. So eating with that in mind. And another one, I'm literally obsessed with this. My first trimester of this pregnancy, this is pretty much all I ate, is just yogurt and fruit and some granola. It sounds really simple, but it just gives you that little hit of like sweetness, but it's not going to get you come crashing down. So I really hope that was useful. And I think things to kind of summarize, there's a lot going on with your hormones, and that's probably dictating how we're feeling in terms of the sugar cravings, which, is normal. It's also about recognizing that like we shouldn't be thinking in those early postpartum days, oh God, I shouldn't be eating these foods because they're bad, or we really should be focusing on nourishing. What can we add into our diet to really nourish our body and help with that recovery? If we're not nourishing our body, we're not going to recover as quickly. And, that's what I always say about kind of movement and physical activity. But this from a nutrition standpoint, and I know I've spoken to Haley about this because I'm not a nutritionist, but she is. And it's really, really important that we do everything we can to support our body's, healing process. So things like drinking just shitloads of water. That's what you want to do, guys. And with loads of my clients, when I have conversations with them about nutrition, the first thing I start by saying is, Do you wake up in the morning and have a pint of water to drink? Because if you don't, just start doing that and you're going to feel better. I know some people that will get to 5 o'clock and they've drunk like no water. My parents being some of them till now they've got their water bottles that they carry around like us. But water is, it's so, I'm not even going to like patronize anyone by saying how important it is, but there are so many people not hydrating properly and not drinking enough water. So that's the first place to start. And just really thinking about where you can, nourishing whole foods, that's not to say when you're breastfeeding in the middle of the night, you're not going to have, you might have something there if if you're really hungry, but just try when you can to be thinking about how this is going to make me feel. And on the flip side of that, not feeling guilty if you like have a piece of cake every day in the first 6 weeks postpartum, as long as the other stuff around it is really providing the body all those nutrients it needs. So hopefully that was really helpful. And I think every single person that's been through pregnancy and postpartum will really value that question. And I think just knowing that part of it is to do with our hormones and the hormones related to lack of sleep is such a powerful message, because it's about thinking, oh God, it's not just me wanting to eat sugar all the time. It's about energy and it's about what your body needs. So I think that's really important. Okay, last question, guys. This person says, I'm feeling pretty good in pregnancy. Well done, you. But unsure about how to support my pelvic health. My favorite topic, guys. There is nothing wrong, so I don't think I need to see a physio, but I'm not sure what to do or whether to seek help or where to seek help. So I think this is a great question, and I've been having a lot of conversations with people about this, and there's kind of quite a lot I can say on it. The first thing is women's health physio or pelvic health physios are incredible. The accessibility to this in this country is inconsistent. So anecdotally, my experience of working with clients and my own experience is if you can pay for a women's health physio, you can normally find one, and you can find a really, really good one. My women's health physio is amazing. I will put her details in the show notes in case anyone's in Southeast London. She is absolutely incredible. And I've seen her all the way through my first pregnancy, postpartum, first pregnancy, and then all the way through this pregnancy. It's something I was able and privileged financially to take responsibility for. I train a lot, so I wanted to have some support on where my pelvic floor was at. I suffered a couple of niggles, a bit of pelvic girdle pain in my first pregnancy, and some varicose veins in my second pregnancy that I wanted to get some advice on. But because I paid for it, I was able to access it. Accessing on the NHS is a little trickier, and this person's saying there's nothing wrong, so that would be harder. If however, you are postpartum or prenatal and you are having pelvic health issues, so any pelvic dysfunction, any symptoms, anything going on that you are concerned about, you are well within your rights, the same as any other service on the NHS, to have access to a pelvic health physio. That said, what I've heard from clients and people that I work with is that the wait is fairly long and we just don't have the resources that we should have. But it is your right to do that, and you can be referred. So it's really important to speak to your GP, to get in touch with someone if you are going with the NHS as quickly as possible, and be really honest about what your symptoms are, and not accepting that, leaking is normal because you've had a baby. No, I want to see someone about this. I want an opinion. I want to see what's going on, and I want some help. So there's this thing about accessibility, which is really important. But what I wanted to say in this answer is, what I think is really important is this person is saying there's nothing wrong. So I don't think I need to see a physio. However, I would argue that this idea of prevention rather than kind of treatment is a really good way to look at it. It's kind of like, oh, I don't need to bother doing my pelvic floor exercises until week 36, and then I'm just going to do a few squeezes and that's going to be fine. It's like, you want to go into this as strong as you can. You want to be thinking about how you can strengthen that pelvic floor and core in the lead up in your pregnancy. And you want to be getting a pelvic floor assessment from a physio or a healthcare professional so that you know what's going on and you know what to work on. Are there any weaknesses? Is there something you need to be doing? Is there something you need to be, taking into account leading up to your labor and birth? So I think my advice to this person would be, it doesn't matter whether there's anything wrong. We kind of don't want to wait until there's something wrong, really. We want to be equipped with that knowledge and kind of, expertise and see someone before that. That said, postpartum, if there are any complications, you should be referred to a pelvic health physio. And I was actually talking to a client and friend of mine yesterday, who was saying, my experience was really positive. I was referred to a pelvic health physio post birth. She had quite a difficult birth and a bit of a recovery in terms of pelvic health. But she said her physio was absolutely incredible. But what she did say, which I found interesting, which is something to think about when answering this question, is she said, Iona, to be honest, if I hadn't been referred, I don't think I would have asked, or I don't think I would have known what to ask for. And I think this is the same for lots of women that I meet. Oh, I didn't know I could, self-refer. I didn't know I could go and see someone about this, which sounds, really obvious, but we really want to think about, being able to go and speak to someone about this. And after, particularly postpartum, but still, in pregnancy, if we've got any symptoms, but particularly postpartum, there's lots of things being missed. And, when your body's recovering from birth, there's a lot going on. So we don't always know straight away exactly what's happened. But if you have any concerns, it's about knowing that it's your right to get in touch with someone and get referred and ask to see a pelvic health physio. How do I do that? And know that that is your right, and that it might take a while on the NHS, but that you should be able to see someone. Okay. And I think there's just lots of things being missed and being kind of people not being given the support that they need. Sometimes because they don't know how to ask for it, which, sounds crazy, but is true. So I think that would be my advice. But for this person in particular, not waiting until there's something wrong, thinking about how can we be as strong as we can. So that's, doing all the core exercises that we were talking about, thinking about those things, going to see a physio if you can, and if you're able to in pregnancy, to get that pelvic floor assessment, to get that support. What kind of exercises can you be doing? All those kind of things. Yeah, really thinking about that in the lead up to birth and post-birth. So I really hope that was helpful, and don't wait, go and seek that help that's out there. I've mentioned a lot of kind of studies. I've mentioned quite a lot of people's names. I'm going to drop a fair amount of resources and kind of links in the show notes here, and with a little explanation. So there's lots of kind of signposting of places that you can go to get help and support. And and I really hope that's useful. I've loved doing this episode. I think it's going to be one of those episodes that hopefully I can share for years to come, when people have kind of a common question about pregnancy or postpartum. And I'd love you to do the same. I'd love you to be able to just share this around like a resource and say, I was listening to Pregnant and Strong podcast and I heard Iona talking about this study or this, and just if it helps someone make that informed choice about what they're doing in pregnancy, then I've won. Now, this is the last episode and I can't believe it's over. I'm sure I'm going to be back. And I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone that has been on the pod, all the conversations that we've had, everyone who's listened, who's commented, who's sent me feedback, who's supported me. I would love you to keep sharing this. This is not kind of a series that I made at this particular time to only be listened to now. It's, it's not like a current affairs podcast that can only be listened to at a certain time. I want these to be shared. I want these to be used for months and years to come. So I'm really hoping that that is the case and we can use this as a resource to spread the message far and wide. And if you are on this wild journey with me, good luck. And I can't wait to hear from lots of you about how it's gone and any more comments and kind of feedback on the pod. Thank you so much for the support and thank you for joining me. And take care. Bye.